Good evening. There's so much talk out there about adult suicide that I thought it would be helpful to focus my thoughts this evening on preventing teen suicide. And I mean, from a parent's perspective, breaking it down to maybe just 10 important things that parents can do. As children grow into teenagers, it becomes more and more difficult to know what they're thinking, what they're feeling, when do their normal ups and downs of adolescence become something to worry about. And I think it's so important to learn about the factors that can put a teen at risk for suicide. And quite frankly, long before they become teenagers, I don't think it's ever too soon to start watching. So I'm breaking this down into 10 points. There's obviously more than 10 things to worry about, but after all my research and my experience, I think if you can just get your head around these 10, you're off to a good start. So let's start with number one. Don't let your teen's depression or anxiety snowball. Maybe your child's merely having a bad day. Maybe it's something more if this mood has been going on for a couple of weeks. But as many of you know, depressed people often retreat into themselves, when secretly they're crying out to be rescued, but they just can't bring themselves to say that. And often they're just too embarrassed to talk about their unhappiness to others, including mom and dad in particular. Boys in particular might try to hide their emotions. I know from being a man that I would be the first one to do that. When you hide it, as boys will do, it's in this misguided belief that displaying the feeling is a 50-foot high neon sign of weakness. And face it, men don't want to come across feeling weak. Let's not wait for them to come up to us with their problems or their concerns, knock on the door. It's your job to knock on the door. Park yourself in the bed and say, you seem to be sad. Would you like to talk about it? Maybe I can help. So that was number one. Number two, just listen. Even when your teen isn't talking, listen. Not all, but most kids are thinking about suicide. Tip off their troubled state of mind through some kind of behavior or action. You just have to be perceptive to it. From my research, studies have found that one trait common to virtually all families affected by a son or daughter's suicide is poor communication between the parents and the kid. And a surprise, surprise. Along with that, there are usually 3 or 4 more issues going on all at once in a kid's life that seems insurmountable to them at their age. And these are things they're thinking about when they're thinking about taking their life. Some of them ones that I focus on, has there been a major loss, a breakup, a young romance, or has there been a death in the family? Is there substance abuse? Is there peer pressure or social pressure, which is pretty common? Key point, do they have access to weapons? Have they been publicly humiliated in any fashion? Are they suffering from chronic pain or maybe some kind of chronic medical condition? What about impulsiveness or aggressiveness? Are you seeing signs of that? And often, there's a family history of suicide. I guess the best advice is, if your instinct tells you that a teenager might be a danger to himself, they probably are. So it's time to heed your instincts. Err on the side of caution. Don't allow them to be left alone. And in that situation, it's always better to overreact to underact. Number 3, never ever shrug off threats of suicide as typical teenage melodrama or behavior. And I mean any written or verbal statement like, I want to die, or I don't care anymore, should be treated seriously. Often, kids who attempt suicide have been telling their parents repeatedly that they intended to kill themselves. But the parents, once again, back to that magic word, just weren't listening, or weren't paying attention, or just wrote it off as they're just a teenager. Most research supports the fact that people who openly threaten suicide don't really intend to take their own lives, and that the threat is a desperate plea for help once again. They're reaching out. They want somebody to connect with them. So while it's true much of the time, what mother or father would want to risk being wrong? Any of these, or even many other red flags, or just random comments from your kids, should be treated seriously and quickly by seeking professional help. Things like, I wonder how many people would come to my funeral. What if you heard your child saying that? How about, sometimes I wish I could just go to sleep and never wake up? And then there's the everyone would be better off without me, which you may have heard in the past. Or you won't have to worry about me much longer. When a teenager starts dropping comments like these or comes right out and admits of feeling suicidal, try not to react with shock. In other words, don't say, "What are you, crazy?" Or, treat him with scorn. That's a ridiculous thing to say. Above all, don't tell him or her you don't mean that. Be willing to, here's that magic word again, sit down and listen. And I mean listen non-judgmentally to what they're really saying, because what they're saying is, I need your love and attention because I'm in tremendous pain and I can't seem to stop it on my own. That's the message. To see your child so troubled is truly hard for any parent, I know that. But your immediate focus has to be on consoling, because you can deal with your own feelings later. But in a calm voice, at least say to them, I see you must be really hurting inside. So you've got to acknowledge their feelings, not cast them aside. Number 4, don't wait. Why wait? Get professional help right away. If your teenager's behavior has you concerned, don't wait to contact a local mental health professional, call the suicide hotline, call somebody who works with children in a professional capacity to have your child evaluated as soon as you can so they can start therapy or counseling, particularly if they're not in immediate danger of self-harm. But if you suspect that they are in immediate danger, that's when you just have to get to somebody quick. Again, the local emergency room, crisis support team, toll-free line. You got to do something quick. Number 5, share your feelings. Let your child know that they're not alone. And sometimes the best way to do that is to not minimize their feelings. Reassure them that their bad times won't last forever, and that you'll be with them to work through everything, one day at a time. Number 6, encourage them not to isolate themselves from family and friends. That's not easy to do. It's usually better to be around for other people than to be alone, or around other people than alone. But don't push too hard if they say no. Just make the effort. Number 7, this may sound strange, but recommend exercise. In fact, your child will probably say, "What are you, nuts?" But from my research, physical activity as simple as walking or as vigorous as pumping iron can put the brakes on mild to moderate depression. From what I've read, there are several theories why that happens. Working out causes a gland in the brain to release endorphins, a substance believed to improve mood and ease pain. You get what they call an endorphin rush. Endorphins also lower the amount of cortisol in the circulation. Cortisol is a hormone, and it's been linked to depression. The other thing with exercise is it distracts people from their problems and makes them feel better about themselves because they're doing something proactively. Experts recommend working out 30 to 45 minutes a day, 2 to 5 days a week. That doesn't have to be a set schedule. It's just some level of repetitive discipline would be helpful. Any form of exercise will do. What matters most is that your kids enjoy whatever the activity is and that they continue to do it on a regular basis. Number 8, talk to your teen. Urge them not to demand too much of himself or herself. Until therapy begins to take effect, it's probably not the time for them to take on a whole bunch of extra responsibilities, a new job, something that could prove overwhelming. Simply suggest to them that they divide large tasks into small ones. If they got a lot of stuff to do, a lot of homework, just chop it up into pieces, and more manageable ones whenever they can, and do their favorite things first, what they would call their low-stress activities. Remember, the goal here is for them to rebuild confidence and self-esteem. Number 9, remind your child who's undergoing treatment not to expect immediate results. You're not going to go to the office of the professional today and see results tomorrow. Talk therapy and even medication usually takes time to improve their mood. You don't want them to become discouraged if they don't feel better, the next day. So reassure them that it's not an overnight miracle, but they have to give it time. And this is number 10. So last but certainly not least, if you keep guns in the home, store them safely. Again, be smart, overreact. Move all firearms elsewhere until the crisis is passed. If you suspect your child might be suicidal, it's extremely important to keep all weapons, alcohol, medications under lock and key. Always best to overreact with caution, as you would expect. Anyhow, so if I can just wrap up my thoughts here, it's a tough subject. The bottom line is to just keep communications constant, open, and honest. Your child should not only know that they can talk to you about virtually anything, but that you mean it. And you have to be committed to discussing whatever it is they feel is important. And you've got to do it openly and honestly, not casting them away, not minimizing, all those things I mentioned earlier. And please don't hesitate to personalize the discussion. It's just so magical to get some storytelling involved. And what do I mean by that? You talk about your own experiences, your own fears when you were their age or even after that. Let them know that they're not alone, nor are their anxieties or what they feel unique. They're not alone. Again, other people feel this. Other kids are probably going through the same thing. But like most kids, they're not going to talk about it, particularly among their peers. They're going to be embarrassed. Beyond all that, just take a deep breath. And one more time, I'm going to say this word again, simply listen to what they have to say. And that's listening without judgment, without interruption. That's hard to do in a normal discussion with people. Why? Because whether it's an adult or a child, everybody wants to feel seen, valued, and heard. I know that, you know that. And speaking of listening, thanks for listening. I sincerely hope that this message has raised your awareness of the real challenge surrounding teen suicide. God bless you all.